Greetings, ASA members. This first edition of News You Can Use for the 2018-19 school year is going out to all the members that we have current addresses for. Many people have changed positions since last year, and if they haven't renewed their membership yet, we may not be able to reach them. If you know some of those people, tell them, get us their new membership applications and their new addresses in their new district so we can reach out to them with News You Can Use and our other communications. We'll start today with some discussion of test scores. Then we'll move on to a new law. Then we'll talk funding. It's always a subject on our minds. Then we'll finish with some opportunities. But let's start with some discussion of test scores. As you know, this year, for the A through F accountability system, the menu of assessments is now open for high schools. And remember, in 1920 school year, the menu of assessments will be open for elementary schools as well. Now, some high schools have chosen the ACT for this year. Others have not made a decision to use one as yet, but probably by next year, many more districts will be on the menu bandwagon. Interestingly, ACT and its counterpart SAT have released a concordance of test scores. So they've had their data experts work to compare scores on the ACT with what that score would yield on the SAT. For example, a 36 on the ACT would be a 1590 to a 1600 on the SAT, and you're getting into Joe's Bar in College or Harvard. A 27, according to these tables on the ACT, would yield a 1260 to a 1290 on the SAT. A 21, a 1060 to a 1090. A 15, don't worry about it, you're not going to college. Now let's move from tables to boards, governing that is. Now remember this year, and this takes effect starting August 3rd, there's a new law on recording board votes in the minutes. ARS 38431 has been amended. You've always had to record which board member makes the motion, moves it, which board member seconds, and then you've just said passes 4-1, passes 5-0, so on. Now you must record how each individual board member votes. So that must go in starting with your August meeting. You must record how each of them voted, yay or nay. Even if it's a 5-0, list them separately how each voted. Keep your eye on potential legislation that's coming out of a National Transportation Safety Board investigation of bus crashes. They are now recommending that legislatures require putting seat belts and shoulder harnesses in all new school buses. Now that would be a significant increased cost in buses. And interestingly, the data, some of which I've seen, does not necessarily support the increased safety. Shoulder harnesses would help, but seat belts alone in buses do not necessarily make kids safer. So look for a potential proposed law in the Arizona legislature this year on seat belts and shoulder harnesses. Okay, speaking of money, let's talk about who gets more money. The age-old debate, at least age-old in Arizona, charters versus public, traditional public that is. So you have the public charters, the traditional public schools. Who gets more money? Well, Craig Harris, a reporter for the Arizona Republic, has been studying and reporting on charter funding and traditional public funding for quite some time now. And July 12th, he put out an article which looked at it closely using JLBC, Joint Legislative Budget Committee reports. And there's different ways of looking at this. Let's first talk about comparisons using state funding only, money appropriated by the state legislature. So, for example, in fiscal 2017, and we have very reliable data on this, charter schools on average received about $6,700 per student from the state. Traditional district schools, $5,300, a $1,400 advantage to the charters. But remember, besides money from the state, schools also get local taxpayers' money in the form of overrides and bonds, and we get money from the feds, especially in the form of grants like Title I. That goes primarily to districts with high rates of student poverty. So when all funds, federal, state, local, are considered, it's reversed. Then district schools receive an average of $9,400 per student, charters $8,500. But remember, when you look at this $9,400 per student, those federal funds are not distributed evenly. They go with a special emphasis to districts with high rates of poverty. Districts with low rates of poverty get much less in federal dollars. And remember again, local funding is not distributed evenly as well. Many districts are not able to get their voting public to agree to bonds and overrides. And it's a double whammy if you have a district with low rates of poverty, so minimal federal funding, and an unwilling public in terms of bonds and overrides. And my friend Dr. Burdick would cite Cave Creek as an example. Then you have two sources that you can't tap, and you're really dependent on state funding, and then you really suffer that disparity. Finally, look at the percentage. In 2016-17, charters had 16% of Arizona students, but received 27% of the state funding for education. Considering charters and publics, who spends more on administration? Who pays their teachers more? I provided the link to that article, and you're going to have to read it to find out. Now let's close with some opportunities. First, the ASA division meeting. The first one of the year is August 21st. That's a Tuesday. It's a change. It's Tuesday, August 21st. We're going to be looking at some issues with school safety and security. And we're going to be looking at, with Alicia Williams, Executive Director of the State Board, we're going to be looking at some changes to A through F and some time schedules of when the A through F grades for schools, and remember this year for districts, are coming out. Finally, the Principals Law Conference, September 19th. Yes, you must know the law to run a school. And then one more thing, the primary election, August 28th. And in Arizona, the primary means many of our legislators will be chosen, not in the general election, but the winner of the primary is a shoo-in to win the general election. So if you want to vote in the primary, you must be registered by July 30th. And remember, every election is determined by the people who actually show up. Don't be a no-show.